Hello again. I'm so excited to be here with JRC, one of the artists that was selected to be a part of the garden exhibition. Hi, JRC. How you doing?
Good to talk to you again.
I am so excited to chat with you. When you walk in the gallery, one of the first pieces you see is your work. And it just conjures up so much nostalgia. The imagery that you choose, the imagery you select really, really tell a story. Your work is analog collage. Can you talk to me a little bit about what that means to you and how you go about selecting your images?
Yeah, analog collage means that I'm working tactilely with the pieces. I have a stack of magazines and books, a lot of glue, scissors, paintbrushes, and I'm assembling things on a board in front of me. What that means to me is that I'm finding things spontaneously and I'm letting the elements of the work sort of drive what they're going to become. I don't often have a goal behind what I'm looking for in a finished piece. I start combining images, see what narrative or thrust they start to have, and let that take me in the direction I want to go.
So where does your source material come from? Is there a time frame or a decade you're trying to kind of encapsulate?
Lately, I've been really drawn to works from elements from 1970 and prior. Around a year or so ago, I got a big stack of 1940s Life magazines, 40s and 50s, and the graphic design and the illustration work in them is brilliant. And of course, Life was always known for their great photography too. So I was really drawn to the almost iconic quality of the imagery there. So that's been a big thrust in my stuff as well lately. But I started pulling in more recent work too because I wanted it to feel more contemporary to the life I'm living. I'd said, I noticed looking through a year's worth of Life magazines, I never saw any people of color. And that felt very foreign to me. So working up through the 70s and that, I'm starting to see images that look more like the world I'm living today in 2020 and using those to construct my pieces.
Interesting. So I'm going to share my screen and show your website where it just has smattering of work and it really just crosses so many themes and so many different storylines. When you say that you don't know what the outcome of the piece is, does that mean you're working on several pieces at once to create these compositions?
Very often, yeah. I'm usually working on 3 to 10 pieces at a time. And out of those, a few of them never wind up getting finished. Or they wind up being sacrificed to create other pieces.
So do you have like catalogs, like files of imagery that you kind of keep, like cigarettes here, competition sports here? How do you catalog your imagery?
For the most part, I keep them as they arrive to me. So I still have a stack of Life magazines. I have a bookshelf of books that I've bought and found and been gifted. And when I start working, I'll pick up one of those and just start leafing through it.
I love it. There's so much story in each of these images, and using these kind of antiquated, these kind of 1940s, 1950s imagery, they feel so connected to today in political sense, in kind of the backlash that our country's having in electing President Trump and everything. I just feel like these people, these kind of older white, and I'm going to name him racist people, still exist. I almost feel like you're trying to have a commentary that even though this is old, these people are still very, very relevant.
I think you're right. There's the more things change, the more they stay the same, as they say. I think what I said earlier about trying to pull these older images into a 2020 context and trying to create a life that looks more like the life I live is in part what you're saying. I will say that I don't feel like I do it. I'm not trying to do it overtly consciously, because I'm still trying to let the pieces or the elements of the work dictate what they become. What's really important for me in the images that I create is that I'm making something that can inspire the viewer to tell a story, to put themselves in the piece and find it, much like you are.
Mm-hmm. So when you say the life I live, if you're using images from the 40s, 50s, and then now the 70s to add that person of color imagery, if you're using images based in a racist context, how can you undo those notions in this imagery? And specifically speaking about this one, it's such a juxtaposition, but you can see African American people behind them are obviously laboring. So how can you take something that is in context in the 60s as being kind of laborer or indentured people and try to remove those shackles into the today's context?
First, I don't know if I can. I'm trying, because you have to be very careful. I'll say that putting a person of color in an image isn't the same as swapping them out for a white character, or vice versa.
Right.
So I try to be very careful when I'm doing that, and find ways where they might be racially neutral or even gender neutral. Doesn't matter to me if it's swapped out with a woman or a person of color. Do I still feel like it's creating a story to tell that is contemporary, egalitarian, universal as best as it can be? That's the tightrope I'm walking a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you're kind of in the confines of using historical material, releasing yourself from those boundaries would be extremely difficult. But I think telling that story needs to be done. So I'm going to share one of the pieces that we had the pleasure of showing at Art Share. It's called Corn. There's so much here. That beautiful farmhouse in the background, corn that's canned, so probably grown at that farmhouse and then processed into today's, our need to preserve and can things. And then it's spilling out with, explain to me what you're trying to say here, if you could.
Spilling out with, and it's either spilling out with or an image that I've decided is death is riding by. And actually, I can go through some of these. The image of death is actually from an advertisement which posited a fifth horseman of the apocalypse being fire. They were trying to sell fire alarms and such. But I think on its own, it reads more as death, coming in this sense as a form of flame, which is also something used to cook with. So death is bringing fire to cook the corn that maybe the people in the farmhouse eat now. Or some people have said to me that they think this piece is about how the omnipresence of convenience is causing us a loss in society or a form of cultural death. Because now we're not going out and growing our corn and bringing it into the house to either shuck or preserve or cook for a meal. We're just going to the grocery store, we're buying the stuff in a can, and we've lost the connection to the earth in that. So,
yeah,
but
absolutely.
I'm open for people to look at and take different things out of.
I mean, it's beautiful and it's gross because you have fresh corn, but then there's kind of this cream thing happening after you cook it, and then the lace just kind of grounds it in that Victorian kind of feel.
Yeah, I wanted to
really
put a shawl sort of thing over the scene in the background. You mentioned my working analog. This is a piece that actually exists in several different forms, and the version that became this print actually has some digital elements to it. The photo was taken from where the farmhouse was taken from a government archive, open source government archive, and the lace was something I found on a shared stock photo website that I combined together to create that. I'm working on actually an analog version of that. And there is, if I can show you, there is another version of this piece that's close to the first way I found it. Let me do a screen share. When I originally found this piece, as I said, it was in probably a Life magazine. It might have been something else, but I held it up to the light and realized that on the back was an underwear ad that lined up almost perfectly with it. And so before I cut the piece up, I'd scanned it in and I'd scan the other side in because I wanted to make a short animation of the piece. That sort of, like to a degree, sort of celebrated how I originally found it, but also maybe this is some other commentary that people can look at and interpret.
You've said that twice now. People can interpret. Do you enjoy hearing people's interpretation of the work that you're sharing?
I do like to talk to people about art and how they interpret it. Mine or anybody's. I think in a lot of ways that's how art comes to life now, is our interpretation of it. We're very experience driven as people, and in gallery art, or let's just say art that hangs on the wall, the experience comes in viewing it and taking it in, but then it grows by the way you expand with your peers and your friends who are seeing it with you.
Yeah. I agree. And I think that's one thing I miss most, is standing in an art gallery with a friend and interpreting art, enjoying it kind of in its real form. So before we go, JRC, I wanted to share your Artsy page. So these works are for sale through our garden exhibition website, all very affordable work. And tell me about that. Is that purposeful? Are you hoping for these, your pieces to find good homes?
I am hoping for my pieces to find good homes. As long as I've been working in art, I've always been a little flummoxed as to what I should be charging for my work. I think a lot of artists go through something like that, but I give myself what I think is a fair wage, and put them out there for people to hopefully take home and love.
That's
to
great.
Continue telling the story.
So tell me, what is your Instagram and your website?
For my website, to start off, is onewordlong.com.
Okay.
And that is actually, that's the same as my Instagram, is also instagram.com/onewordlong. Great.
Well, it sounds like Jason is open to having conversations about his artwork. Go to his Instagram page, DM him, share what you're getting from each of these works that he shared in our gallery and the works that he continues to create. And I can't wait to see what comes next. It just sounds like so much fun being able to flip through history and pull out images that tell a story on its own, but then, placing it with others to make more complex contractions of what 2020 feels like right now.
Thank you.